This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee Bequest for the work of our team.
Hi, everyone. My name's Winifred Lewis, and I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Queensland.
Hey guys, I'm Austin Manchotti. I'm a research assistant on this project.
Hi, I'm Nantisha Shabra. I'm a student at UQ.
And what we're doing is we're making videos about each of the chapters in the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. And this chapter is chapter 30, which is titled Policy and Legislative Outcomes of Environmental Movements. The authors are Eric Johnson and John Agnon. And Eric Johnson is an associate professor of sociology at Washington State University. And John Agnon is a person who works in industry as well as having affiliation to sociology department. So this chapter is of great interest to most psychologists who know little about the policy process, and in particular, the policy process in the United States, which is a major focus of the chapter. And so the point that he makes, the authors make in the chapter, is that the environmental movement stretches into government and includes people within government that are trying to effect change, as well as green parties and advocates for environmental action. And there, as such, the environmental movement is partially integrated into the decision-making apparatus of nation states in the departments of the environment and in the many scientists that are funded by the government. And so there's a kind of broad push to try and change the language and understanding of ecology and influence the drafting of legislation through the environmental movement in ways that will protect the earth. And at the same time, the political opposition to that and political barriers to that also need to be understood. So I guess a beginning point is to look at what political outcomes are trying to be achieved, and what's the answer to that question, Nantisha?
So basically they divided political outcomes of movements into like two categories. So firstly, they want to gain acceptance, and they also want new advantages to be realized in the political system. And basically what they want to do is that they want to have change in the political system based on the environment. So in the US, there's already a lot of acceptance for environmental movements in the political system. But
when they say, sorry, I'll just jump in there. When they say acceptance, they're using it in a specific way, right? Not acceptance like a psychologist would mean that, you know, you're someone and I accept what you're saying. They're really also talking about access to power. So they're saying environmentalists are reaching people in power and able to talk to them. So that's one important outcome. Keep going, sorry.
But in other parts of the world, there's still environmental movements are still connected with other movements. So there's still no clear distinction.
Yeah.
So using environmental issues to like get change is really important for these parts of the world. Basic thing is that they all seek to get change in the policy. However, there isn't much realization of how to get this change in many parts of the world.
Yeah, and this other outcome or category of outcomes called new advantages is when environmentalists are not just talking to people in power, but actually seeing concrete changes occur. And how does that actually happen, Austin?
Well, what they tend to do is they apply a staged model that's sort of broken up into 4 different parts. So the first one is basically they just set their agenda. It's pretty straightforward. And the second part is when they specify the content of the policy proposals and the legislators, and it's often drawn heavily from the technical, scientific, and subject-specific expertise of special interests. Then after that, you get to stage 3, which is the passage of actual legislation and laws saying so-and-so. And finally, after that, you get to stage 4, which is where they implement the policies. And then you look into sort of how the environmental movements affect the policy and legislative outcomes to examine the relationship between the two factors.
Yeah, and I find that part of the chapter incredibly important and interesting. So one of the points the authors are making is that from the outside, people tend to focus just on that last stage, passing laws. And when you look at the stats, they're actually terrible, truly terrible. So in the US, for example, only less than 1% of laws that have been passed across a range of time periods, including more recent times, have actually taken up climate change issues and within a broader category of air pollution issues, which is really such a narrow way of understanding climate change. And so that can lead to the sense that the environmental movement isn't having an impact. But actually, when you look across that, agenda setting and public opinion change has actually been powerfully influenced by the environmental movement. People now understand what climate change is, for example, and they're mobilizing. I've jumped ahead of myself though, because there's actually a whole case study on climate change, and one of the sections is about climate change legislation. The part where they were saying, very little has been achieved legislatively when you actually get to the part about passing laws. But there's another part of climate change social movement, which is mobilization. And the authors really talk quite a bit about that, don't they, Austin?
Yeah, like just to also put a little bit on what you said before, I think I said there's something like 513 legislative hearings on air pollution and or climate change in the last, I want to say 33 years, or last 30 years, give or take, in America. And basically the mobilization says, despite the lack of policy, they have posed, or the US has posed for major action on climate change. There's been increased engagement and tactical diversity around issues in that climate change, particularly in the US movements and all of their, protests and campaigns and everything that they do. And on top of that, climate change is also already occurring within the larger socio-political landscape,
Yeah.
And in the chapter, they go on to present a lot of data across 3 or 4 different pages where they show, impacts and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this whole mobilizing, or the mobilization of it is, is working more and more towards, climate change and changing legislation and making at least America, who's a pretty big country within the big sphere of the world, make them more friendly towards it,
Yeah.
And even outside political areas, the environmental movements are pressing for changes across various other institutions and niches, which indirectly do create pressure on the federal policy system and leads to change down the road, hopefully.
That's right. And I thought that was such a heartening message in the chapter. So, even when the laws haven't been passed yet, there's all these other precursors that are happening. So like Austin said, public opinion has changed. So people actually know what's going on. They know what climate change is, and they have a view that it should be avoided if possible. And businesses are taking it into account, and they're starting to understand the insurance industry, agriculture, that change is happening and that this is an issue for them. And that brings more pressure on the system. And then, like Austin said in the earlier part, scientists within the environmental movement are informing drafts of policies that are being talked about in these hearings, even though we haven't, in the US context, been able to push forward enough. And one of the points as well that the authors make looking at the world stage is that in some ways that 2015 Paris Agreement brought everyone together. Almost every country in the world agreed that climate change is happening and that humans should try to limit it. So that is an enormous achievement, even though the implementation isn't there yet. So the last stage after passing the laws, which needs to happen, is actually enforcing and implementing, which also needs to happen. And that'll happen with the aid of environmental movements, is the point that he makes repeatedly. And the last thing I guess I wanted to say, this is probably my big takeaway from the chapter in terms of their perspective, but there's often a tension or oppositionality between using like direct action, conventional action for climate, like protests and rallies, or blockades, or lobbying, or industry, and so on. And there can be these oppositionalities where people are saying, which works, where should we put our energy? And to a certain extent, he was saying, or the authors were saying, this is a systems context where we actually need to have everything going on at once, because an opportunity will come up that has a very short window to act because of other political factors like a change of government. And you don't know in advance when that time will come, and you don't know what will be needed. So he said the environmental movement needs to have conventional and radical and lobbying and industry and social movement affecting public opinion all the time at high speed in order to take advantage of any opportunities. So I thought that's a kind of heartening message, because in a way that is what I see happening. There's a lot of people doing a lot of different things. It's kind of not coordinated, but it is a system of change maybe happening. What about you guys? What did you take from the chapter, either or both of you?
For me, my main takeaway is the process of policy making and the importance of changing people's cognitions, because in order to get change, you need to change their lifestyle, their opinions, and also just the norms in society.
Yeah, I think that's where, as psychologists as well, we kind of feel a point of connection. It's like, it may seem like an obvious point, but it's actually really important. You do need to change people's minds and change their understandings. That is part of system and social change. What
Mm.
about you, Austin?
I have to agree. I'd say that was the big thing I took away, but particularly the applied aspect of it. It fleshes out the gap between climate or environmental movements and then actually changing laws. A lot of people, you turn on the news, you see, climate strikes or climate movements or anything that works for anything that people do, and then you just hope that that will eventually 5 years down the road change some law so that they makes everyone go into electric cars, for instance. Like,
Yeah,
but this really helps fill in the gap, and you can understand the process. Which, if you, in theory, you could change your behavior and how you go about doing like climate protests and whatnot, and hopefully suit the system better so you can
yeah,
get to those changes faster. You don't have
yeah.
to wait so long to see big changes.
I totally agree. It's really exciting. So we could try and map out, like at the national level and also at local government levels, like where are we in the policy process? Have they started to hold hearings? Have there been
Yeah.
drafts? Or are we at the stage where the law has been passed and naturally we should focus on implementing and
Mm.
resourcing the enforcement of the law, like with plastic bags, or do we need to loop back and really go to the square one where we actually need to help people understand what the issue is and why it's a good to move forward? So yeah,
Mm.
super helpful chapter.
Yeah.
And I'll say thank you to you both for participating in the recording, because that's very appreciated. And also thank you to our viewers. Thanks for being with us today. Bye now.
See ya.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.